Our story begins with Dagun, a regular student at an ordinary school. However, due to his small stature and gentle nature, Dagun became the target of bullying by the mischievous kids in his class. At first, when erasers would suddenly fly at him, Dagun thought it was just a coincidence. Oh, I think I accidentally threw an eraser at you. Sorry, I meant to throw it to the person sitting in front of you. The kids would laugh and explain insincerely. However, Dagun noticed that there was no one sitting in front of him. It was then that he began to realize something was wrong. Realizing it was one thing, but standing up for himself was another. The gun chose to remain silent and endure, but that only gave the bullies more confidence to continue. Erasers kept flying at the gun's head, making it impossible for him to focus on his studies. People often say a moment of patience is worth 9 moments of peace, but how long could anyone tolerate it? After a short time of suppressing his feelings, Dagun finally turned around and boldly demanded that the bullies stop his malicious joke. To his surprise, instead of feeling remorse, the bully acted arrogantly and insolently, making the atmosphere between them more tense than ever. To him, the fact that Dagun dared to speak out in opposition was utterly unacceptable. To preserve his pride, he didn't think he needed to listen to Dagun. On the contrary, when he saw Dagun approaching with an angry expression, he became even more furious. Dagun, feeling anxious about the tense situation, tried to explain that he just wanted peace and had no intention of offending or opposing anyone. But someone like him, a petty person, only knew how to strike instead of speak. Rather than listening, he no longer threw an eraser, but directly threw his hand at Dagon's face. Realizing things were escalating, Dagon tried to apologize to ease the situation. However, the bully had no intention of stopping. He continued to attack relentlessly. The students around them just stood and watched, treating it like a spectacle, completely indifferent to the violence unfolding. It wasn't until the teacher entered that a new student hurriedly ran over to try and intervene. The gun silently thought that he had finally been saved, but the reality was completely different. Despite Dagun's attempts to seek help and signal the teacher, she just turned a blind eye and coldly said, "Both of you should stop this childish behavior." Those words felt like a bucket of cold water poured over Dagon's flickering hope, making him realize that even the adults weren't on his side. Surprised, stunned, and completely shocked were the emotions that Dagon experienced. He couldn't believe that his teacher viewed what had just happened in front of her eyes as merely a joke. The hope of being helped was now shattered. Pleading for the bully to stop had no effect, and expecting help from anyone else was hopeless. The only thing Dagon could do at that moment was to grit his teeth and endure. Even when the immature kid stuck a paper with the words "No Mother" on his back, Dagon couldn't resist. He had no one to share the pain he was in. The adults were indifferent, and no one was willing to offer help. In his own classroom, Dagon was completely isolated, submerged in loneliness and helplessness. However, things started to change when another bully appeared in the class. At first, it seemed like nothing to mention until he entered the classroom asking for cigarettes. At that moment, his gaze accidentally caught the paper stuck on Dagon's back. A person who despised childish games, the white shirt guy approached, grabbed the collar of Dagon's shirt, and yanked the paper down to read the words. As soon as he finished reading "No Mother," he immediately flew into a rage. The thug quickly interrogated and discovered that the person behind this childish prank was Dagon's immature friend. Without further words, the man in white immediately showed his furious attitude. Sensing the impending danger, the immature kid desperately tried to justify himself, claiming he was just teasing Dagon because he was an orphan and had no intention of offending him. The man in white, however, ignorance comes with consequences. What the immature kid didn't know was that the man in white was also an orphan. Therefore, his ridiculous and disrespectful behavior was completely unacceptable. Without any further explanation, the man in white taught the immature kid a lesson he would never forget. He was beaten so badly that even his parents wouldn't recognize him, a ruthless punishment for his despicable actions. Witnessing the entire event, Dagon initially felt fear, but as he reflected on how the man in white fiercely defended his own dignity, he gradually realized that strength was the key to never having to suffer bullying again. As time passed, Dagon's determination was proven through his relentless efforts. From devouring martial arts books and training his physical strength to learning real-life combat skills, from televised matches, Dagon gradually became stronger each day. His skills and physical fitness improved dramatically enough to turn his dream of no longer being bullied into a reality. The intensity of Dagon's training continued to increase, and the martial arts books gradually became second nature to him. With unwavering perseverance, his height, weight, endurance, and strength improved dramatically over time. He gradually underwent a transformation, becoming a completely new person. After some time, Dagon finally returned to school. But far from the meek little bunny he once was, he now attracted the attention of female students with his muscular and captivating physique. However, not every girl dared approach him, as he had become the king of the school, someone who used violence to rule over violence. Dagon was no longer the king, but just an ordinary young man working as a clerk at a small convenience store. The story of school violence, or what is called Ilgin, the strong ruling over the weak, seemed to continue unabated beyond the control of teachers. Even when the Ilgin were no longer around, bullies would still seek out other Ilgin, those stronger than themselves, to lean on. This is also the topic that S wants to present in her project called Ilgin Dominates Yan. Through this project, S aims to form a team that operates in the shadows, responsible for managing the Ilgin and maintaining order. It can be said that this is a project for control through Ilgin. From S's presentation, the plan seems quite interesting, but the idea of controlling violence with violence is a very crazy one. Therefore, a few members of the council who attended the meeting proposed to the old chairman to dismiss this ridiculous project. However, the old chairman seemed uninterested in whether S's plan was truly a bad idea or not. After hearing what his employees had presented, he just wanted to know if anyone was capable of taking over Ilgin. Back to Dagon. Although the part-time job he holds is fairly stable, Dagon still feels incredibly frustrated. He can't even focus on his work and has to endure the constant moral lectures from the old shop owner all day long, to the point that it makes him sick. In fact, Dagon wouldn't have found himself in this situation if he hadn't dropped out of school. But now, even though he regrets it, he can't go back. That's why at this moment, he desperately wants to find somewhere to clear his mind. The scene shifts to an alley near the convenience store where Dagon works. As usual, the bullies drag another unfortunate soul into the alley to rob them. For the weak student, they were like sharks, but to someone stronger, the heavily tattooed young man and his companions were nothing more than mudfish. That's why when hearing the senior tell them to stop and order them to buy some cigarettes, the tattooed young man and his girlfriend immediately obeyed without daring to say a word back to Dagon. After having to listen to the shop owner ramble on with moral lessons, he finally got a moment of peace, but it didn't last long. When the other two entered, the shop owner immediately broke into a cold sweat, making an excuse to check the staff room and the accounting books to sneak away, leaving Dagon alone at the register. Dagon had just faced off against two truly immature kids. As soon as he saw them, he recognized them as high school students. When they asked to buy cigarettes, Dagon sensed something wasn't right and asked for ID. Of course, as students, they had none. The tattooed youth tried to deflect, speaking in circles and attempting to brush it off, clearly displaying a fake thug act. Dagon bluntly told them to leave, wanting to clear the air. Being told to get lost by a part-time staff member didn't sit well with the immature kid's girlfriend. She immediately went into girlfriend mode, threatening Dagon. The tattooed young man joined in, tossing money in front of Dagon while playing the role of both provocateur and audience. It had been a long time since Dagon had encountered such disrespectful brats. Deep down, he wanted to punch the arrogant kid in the face, but for the sake of his livelihood, he remained polite and asked the young man to show his identification. Upon hearing this, the fake thug not only ignored him, but shamelessly grabbed two more bottles of liquor to impress his girlfriend. Annoyed, Dagon demanded that he stop the charade immediately. Yet, even for something as simple as buying cigarettes and alcohol, the immature kid became reckless, grabbing Dagon by the collar and shouting, "Do you know who my father is? You better lower your tone or I'll break your jaw so you can't brag anymore." Watching from behind the bar, owner, aware that the tattooed youth was no saint, quickly rushed out to intervene. To avoid unnecessary trouble and knowing he couldn't reason with the immature kid, the owner apologized and suggested Dagon step outside to settle the matter, preventing it from affecting the other customers. Hearing that, although he didn't like how the boss allowed things to continue, Dagon had no choice but to face the immature kid. The little brat thought that now they were outside Dagon would change his attitude, trembling and weak. The brat puffed up his cheeks, narrowed his eyes, and threatened in a harsh voice. "Hey, you little dog, repeat what you just said. We're outside now. Do you want me to beat you to death?" "Damn it, if you get beaten here, no one will be able to protect you, you lowly part-timer." But life never plays out the way the weak expect. Not only did Dizon not care about the threats, but on the contrary, he remained incredibly calm and cool as he ordered the brat, "Take your hands off my collar." He bluntly gave him 3 seconds to comply. Hearing this, the brat's girlfriend burst out laughing as though it was the most ridiculous joke she had ever heard. She mocked. "Haha, are you counting down from 3, you idiot? Are you crazy, or are we filming a movie and I didn't know about it?" With a smug expression, she assumed Dagon must have lost his mind to dare speak like that to her boyfriend. Meanwhile, Dagon started counting down. 3. The tattooed young man still hadn't realized what was happening, and he raised his hand, preparing to slap Dagon, thinking he would teach him a lesson in manners. And so in a daze, the immature kid heard his girlfriend calling, tried to open his eyes, and only then realized he had been knocked out in the blink of an eye. Truly, a fake thug through and through. Even though his face was swollen from the beating, he still refused to admit it, claiming it was just an unfortunate accident, and that's how Dagon took the opportunity to sneak attack him. He comforted himself by thinking that if it had been a fair fight, Dagon wouldn't have stood a chance. While still bragging loudly, the immature kid didn't forget to signal his girlfriend to go get more people. However, since she couldn't hear him clearly, she asked him to speak louder. Hearing this, he yelled at her, cursing her out and telling her to go bring more people to gang up on Dagon. After being yelled at, she angrily stormed off to call her friends. Dot, on the other hand, the immature kid began to act all high and mighty, arrogantly asking Dagon, "Haha, loser, aren't you from this city? Do you know who I am? Do you know who my crew is that you dare to challenge me?" It sounded tough, but when it came to these fake thugs, Dagon had dealt with them more than once. Despite the opponent's constant boasting, Dagon maintained a calm tone, curious about the age of the immature kid. However, the latter stubbornly refused to answer. Sensing that the other person didn't appreciate gentle conversation, Dagon lightly hooked his finger into the man's collarbone and squeezed. In just 3 seconds, the heavily tattooed youth confessed that he was only 17 years old. Even though the immature kid was screaming in pain, Dagon calmly threatened that if he ever came back to buy cigarettes again, he would make him unrecognizable to his parents. At that moment, his girlfriend arrived with a group of thugs. Although the immature kid seemed somewhat embarrassed when he saw his companions, Dagon remained completely at ease. To him, a few more chickens didn't make a difference. Dagon calmly asked, "Is everyone here now?" Still, no matter how he looked at it, Dagon couldn't believe the big guy in front of him was a high school student. He wondered to himself if the immature kid had called his uncle for backup. Hearing this, the chubby guy retorted, "I'm Dean, a student at Namdong High School," he said with a defiant tone. "I don't know who you are, but let me hit you first." As soon as he finished speaking, the fat young man, without caring who stood in front of him, attempted to charge forward and land a punch right into Dagon's face to teach him a lesson. However, with just a light caress of his cheek, the delusional young man found his mouth twisted and immediately collapsed onto the ground unconscious. His girlfriend, witnessing this, was utterly confused. How could a man as big as an ox fall to the ground after just one sudden blow? As for Dagon, with many tasks still ahead, he suggested, "I can't stay here any longer. You all go in and let's grab the goods quickly." Insulted, the fake big thugs, enraged, advanced, wanting to settle the score with Dagon. However, despite their intimidating appearance, their actual skills were too low to pose any real challenge. Dagon had no trouble handling each one. He continuously dodged their attacks, countering with swift and lethal strikes. Every move was precise, with no wasted punches. From blocks and dodges to jabs and hooks, The thugs kept rushing in, only to quickly find themselves gasping for air under the gun's control. From behind, in an attempt to take revenge for the earlier slap from the gun, the tattooed young man was about to use the bottle of liquor he had picked up to attack the gun. However, when Dagun turned around, the immature kid was immediately met with a punch so powerful that he flew through the air like a kite in the wind, crashing hard into a corner of the wall. In less than 3 minutes, the fake thugs were all lying motionless on the ground. The leader, upon seeing this, immediately realized that such a powerful person could only be one person in this place. Not wanting to escalate the situation any further, the leader of the fake thugs softly greeted, "You were Senior Quan Gon, right? You used to attend the same school as me in the past, correct?" Upon hearing Dagon's name, the girlfriend next to him immediately recognized him as the one who had once led the Incheon area, a territory he had ruled during the bloody times 2 years ago, but was wiped out by Dagon in just a week. She had heard that being shot might be better than being beaten by Dagon, but she couldn't deny that he looked quite handsome. So just as expected, rumors are just rumors, right? Seeing Dagon, the leader immediately bowed his head, apologized, and promised not to repeat his actions, hoping that Dagon would forgive him and his underlings this time. Hearing it made his ears itch. Dagon immediately grabbed the head of the fake thug and told him to stop spouting nonsense. As for his girlfriend beside him, because of her reckless partying, her death could be pardoned, but other offenses still had to be paid for. As for the young men lying sprawled on the ground, the leader volunteered to take the whole group to the hospital, but a clever guy like him knew that there was no hospital here. After a while, the leader had to slap the fat guy's face to wake him up, regardless of the fact that the other person didn't understand what was going on. What needed to be done right now was for the leader to make the fat guy bow his head and take his punishment. As for Dagon, after a brief moment of punishment, he warned the group not to cause any more trouble at the convenience store again. Otherwise, they would soon find out what it meant to bid farewell to life. Hearing this, the whole group chorused that they understood, because no matter how foolish they weren't crazy enough to mess with the former legend of Incheon again. From a distance, while Dagon was handling the immature kids and recounting the reason why he dropped out of school, a shadow had been lurking and observing him for a while. After a while, as Dagon was lost in thought about the past events that had kept him from finishing his studies, he recalled the time when he was bullied and had no chance to study. But now he felt a sense of satisfaction after such a long time. At that moment, Dagon ran into South right on the street. Having prepared in advance as soon as the other person passed by, Dagon suggested a conversation. However, since she didn't have much time, he wasn't particularly interested. Still, S wasn't there just for a casual chat. With a business card in hand, she wanted to present Dagon with an irresistible offer from GM Ryan's education program. S lived up to Chairman GM Ryan's expectations by quickly finding the right person for the Ellen Control project. On the other hand, when the opportunity arose, Dagon seized the chance to return to high school and fulfill his dream of holding a press conference. Even though he was nearly 20 years old this year, standing in front of the school gate, Dagon couldn't believe he was starting high school at the age of 20. Returning to the conversation between Dagon and S. Previously, Dagon had been briefed by her about the Ilgan domination project that she wanted to implement. She had also provided more details about the plan. Indeed, just as the project's name suggested, Ilgan would dominate Ilgan and confirm with certainty that the project was entirely feasible after seeing Dagon's abilities. However, Dagon believed that S was doing foolish things under the guise of running the education system. No one uses violence to control violence. Hearing this, S immediately retorted, "Of course we've investigated your information, Mr. Dagon." Dagon wondered who she was. Without hesitation, she bluntly replied, "You're more useless than anyone else, so stop trying to act tough. Even if you think this is unreasonable, I know you don't have the ability to refuse. This isn't the time to boast about the past. Isn't this the opportunity to make up for all the mistakes of the past? This is your chance to correct the mistakes you made when you were younger. So if you refuse, you'll have nothing left." Faced with the sharp arguments from the other side, Dagon realized his situation. So even though S's project seemed rather ridiculous, he had no choice but to accept her offer. Returning to reality as a new transfer student, Dagon quickly caught the attention of the girls at GM Rong High School in class 1-1. While the blonde-haired young man was still enjoying the fun of bullying, the class leader of one-to-one was more interested in the new student who had transferred in. Hearing about the transfer student, it just so happened that someone had recently left class one-to-one because they had been bullied by the whole group. Jiang Min said first that Giant Elephant dropped out. Ho Jiang said next, I don't care about the reason, but that was some uprising game. Jiang Min continued, why did she drop out? I like that. Isn't it because Park Jae-yul had taken off her underwear before? The girl next to him said, shut up. That was just an accident. Jin Ho teased, why are you asking about rotating the bread to do something else? You need to be careful so that guy can focus on buying bread for me. The teacher shouted from inside, hey, stop gathering and get inside. While the group was chatting animatedly about bullying some of the classmates, the transfer student arrived. Oh, the transfer student should be here now, right? The teacher said. Hey, stop talking and sit down. Today, we have a new student. Go ahead and introduce yourself. The boy spoke up. I'm Hwan Gun. I'm from Incheon. The girls in the class all blushed, with one even borrowing lipstick from a friend to do her makeup. The boys were equally surprised by Dagon's appearance. Even Nagloe, a member of the party group, was completely smitten by Dagon's looks and quickly did her makeup to make an impression on the new student. However, on the other hand, Ho Jong felt extremely annoyed as a new kid had appeared and stolen all the attention that used to be his. He was now looking forward to the moment when he could teach the new student a lesson. As for Dagon, the teacher announced that a student had dropped out, so Dagon would take that empty seat and quickly adapt to school life. Dagon quickly got acquainted with his neighbor Min Soo, who introduced him to the school they were attending. However, as soon as the old teacher left, Ho Jang, with a smirk on his face, approached Dagon's seat. True to his unruly nature, he quietly walked over and suddenly slammed Min Soo's head, demanding that he go somewhere else. Out of nowhere, this fat guy came to disrupt the scene, and Dagon had no idea what the hell the fat guy was doing. As for the overweight guy, he didn't immediately attack the new student. Instead, he ordered Min Soo to shut up and go buy some sausage bread for him. The reason is very simple, he said. That old friend of yours used to be in charge of buying bread for me, but now he's dropped out of school without a shred of sincerity, and now that parasite has run off. Do you think you can escape? Anyway, you should take responsibility for your friend, shouldn't you? Right now, you're officially in charge of buying bread for me. Congratulations. Meanwhile, on the side, Dagon quietly observed, keeping his promises to S. In contrast with the authority of the class leader, Hojang pressured Min Soo to comply with his demands. Out of the blue, Min Soo was forced to comply. He was tempted to give in to avoid further conflict, but because he had a class right after the discussion, he tried to beg Hojang for mercy this time. On the other side, Jang Im grinned like he had hit the jackpot when Min Soo mentioned the class time to him. For Hojang, every moment felt the same. So in response to Min Soo's plea, Hojang ordered everyone to close their eyes so he could execute the punishment in no time. To Dagon's surprise, the entire group of fools in the class obeyed Hojang's request and shut their eyes. Immediately afterward, the class bully from one-to-one slapped Min Soo across the face without hesitation for daring to defy him. Standing by and observing, Dagon truly wanted to teach the fat kid a lesson he'd never forget. However, to ensure the confidentiality of the project, he had to adhere to the strange rules set by S. According to S's perspective, school was just a kingdom where animals, whether weak or strong, coexist. In that kingdom, an ordinary lion could never become the king of the monsters. Therefore, S required Dagon not to be an ordinary lion. Back in the present, Dagon was still struggling with the difficult terms of the contract with them, to the point where he had forgotten about the need to turn a blind eye. As they had requested to educate the new recruit, Hojong mentioned that Dagon had just taken the position of the dropout who had been running errands. As a further jab, he suggested Dagon go buy bread with Min Soo. Upon hearing this, Dagon showed irritation. In his opinion, one person was enough to go buy bread. There was no reason for him to go along. Seeing Dagon's reaction, Ho Jong and his blonde-haired friend chuckled, thinking that Dagon was deliberately making a fuss to avoid going with Min Soo. However, no matter how much they laughed, buying bread was not a request, it was an order. Therefore, the fat guy immediately snapped in a harsh tone, commanding Dagon to stand up and go buy it right away. Out of options and not wanting to make a big deal out of it, Dagon reluctantly followed Hojang's advice and stood up to go buy some bread. However, the first thing that came to his mind was, where's the money? Therefore, Dagon extended his hand, asking them to give him some money so he could buy the bread. Having been the big brother for so long, Hojang had never seen anyone daring enough to ask him for money. So he immediately grabbed Dagon by the head and shouted, "Are you crazy? Don't point your finger at me like that. Of course I'll take the money from your pocket. Do you think I'm that kind-hearted? Don't you have any money to buy bread? Did your father never give you pocket money, or do you not have parents?" His words unintentionally touched a deep, painful wound in Dagon. The young Hojang immediately received the bitter end for his stupidity and arrogant attitude. One punch made him dizzy, two punches left him bewitched, and in the blink of an eye, Hojang had to bear the full brunt of Dagon's thunderous rage. Witnessing the scene, the other students in the class were so stunned they almost fell over. At that moment, Dagon no longer cared about the absurd rules in his contract with S. For him, a fist was the real rule in this school. To assert his dominance and show everyone who the boss of the class really was, Dagon lightly claimed his first victory, leaving Hojang, who had arrogantly declared himself the king of class, one-to-one speechless. Unbelievable. That was the thought running through GWI's mind along with the rest of the mischievous students in the class. As for Jiang Min, seeing his closest ally taken down in the blink of an eye left him utterly stunned and frustrated. However, whether he was angry or not, the outcome couldn't be changed. After dealing with the brash, overweight student, the next target on Dagon's list was none other than the cunning Jiang Min. With Dagon now focused on him, the blonde-haired student broke out in a cold sweat. Nevertheless, he tried to maintain his composure, pretending that he wasn't fazed. But as Dagon drew closer, Jiang Min immediately launched himself into a preemptive attack, flailing wildly in hopes of landing a surprise blow. He threw punches and kicks, but unfortunately none of them hit their mark. This scratching cat style of fighting was completely ineffective against Dagon. Within seconds, after effortlessly dodging all of his strikes, Dagon's fist found its way straight into Jiang Min's stomach. With a single punch, the blonde was bent over in agony, unable to stay on his feet. Before Dagon could follow up, Jiang Min, clutching his stomach and bowing his head in defeat, shamefully acknowledged his loss. Unlike Jiang Min, a boy near Hojang, who had more guts than brains, stubbornly continued to charge at the relentless author with unwavering resolve. He grabbed a chair, intending to smash it hard into Dagon. But unfortunately, after this fight, his parents would probably have a hard time recognizing their beloved son. And everything ended right there with a punch that landed like a bullet straight to the face. Dagon took down the fat guy in the quickest, most efficient way possible. After the fight, Dagon relaxed a little, feeling his muscles ease up a bit. After all, everything was bound to unfold like this. The so-called Iljin were nothing more than this, nothing to worry about. So Dagon no longer felt anxious about the project. Turning back toward the bullies, Dagon grabbed the fat guy's hair and asked with a mocking tone, "The bread at the snack bar is really good, huh?" The fat guy, confused, asked back, "What do you mean?" Dagon replied, his gaze cold, "I'm curious, how good is it that it made you create this whole mess? Get me some then." As if it were an order, Dagon commanded the fat guy to go get some bread. However, Hojang didn't think he had to follow Dagon's words. Even though he had been defeated, he still couldn't accept it, as he wasn't the true leader of class one-to-one. Hojang, frustrated, threw out a challenge. "You bastard, you think taking down the two of us means you can control everything?" Dagon was confused, not understanding what this idiot was saying. He said, "I'm not the leader of this class. He'll be back soon." After a noisy commotion, the main character finally appeared. It was no man, Ho, the leader of the rough group known for fighting in class one-to-one, and also the one backing up the fat guy. When their gazes met, the atmosphere became tense, signaling that something big was about to happen. On the very first day at a new school, blood had already been spilled. Things were definitely not going to be peaceful. Manhwa was very surprised to learn that the new student dared to go all out right from the first day. What shocked him even more was that Dagon had single-handedly taken out his two buddies, Jiang Min and Hojang. Even more remarkable was that there wasn't a single scratch on Dagon, leaving Manhwa puzzled as to how his two friends had managed to not even land a hit on him. With his top-tier windmill speech skills, Manho quickly shifted the attention and rescued his two companions. Although they narrowly escaped, both He Jiang and Jiang Min were unsure if Manho could actually take down the gun. As for Manho, he continued to showcase his talent for blowing hot air. He loudly asked the remaining noisy group if anyone dared to step up and face the gun in a one-on-one. As for Manho, he had no intention of going all out against the gun. However, despite what he said, Dagon could tell from what he observed that Manho was silently preparing. Manho's legs were spread wide, his center of gravity lowered, and his toes were pointed toward the gun. His shoulders were relaxed, ready to strike at any moment. On the surface, Manho appeared calm, but with a keen-eyed Dagon easily recognized that his opponent was in a defensive stance, the kind seen in kickboxing. Reading Manho was like reading an open book. Dagon was sure that if he let his guard down for even a second, his opponent would immediately attack, possibly throwing a punch at him right away. Beside them, Ho Jiang watched everything unfold. He thought if Dagon didn't know about Manho beforehand, he would definitely hit the escape button right now. Manho is on a whole different level compared to me and Young Min. While the intense scene was playing out, the fat guy ordered one of the classmates to go get some popcorn to enjoy the show. However, Ho Jiang's command was quickly rejected as he had lost his boss status in Class 1-1. Thinking about that made him frustrated. Before he could utter any threats, Ho Jiang's gaze unexpectedly met Dagon's cold, piercing stare. In that instant, he immediately switched to obedient mode, dropping the usual cocky attitude, not daring to cause any further trouble for his classmate. Seeing the group of hooligans no longer showing any fear towards the fat man Manho was somewhat surprised. However, he maintained his calm demeanor as he introduced himself to Dagon. In response, Quan Dagon also stated his name, showing respect for his opponent. Seizing the opportunity, Manho suddenly struck by thrusting his fingers directly towards Dagon's face. However, this surprise attack was merely a trick to distract his opponent. In reality, the deadly move Manho had aimed for was the kick from below. Dagon quickly realized that his opponent was targeting his lower body. He understood the lethal danger of this type of attack. It was a vicious move often aimed at the sensitive area between the opponent's legs, causing the victim to suffer excruciating pain, losing the ability to fight, and feeling like they were living in agony. However, this kind of attack was considered dirty and was often condemned by others. Nevertheless, Dagon never expected that Manho dared to use such a despicable and shameless move. In a moment of surprise, Dagon's body instinctively reacted with the natural defense of a man, and he moved his hands down to protect his sensitive area. But this very action became an opportunity for Manho to launch another deadly strike, and Dagon was hit. Seizing the opportunity when Dagon's hands were busy protecting his crown jewels, Manho didn't miss the chance to deliver a powerful punch to Dagon's face. However, with his exceptional reflex, Dagon managed to dodge in time, minimizing most of the damage from his opponent's strike. Beside them, the two dim-witted boys, one chubby, one skinny, couldn't hide their excitement at their friend's attack. Nevertheless, even though everyone in the class was accustomed to Manho's techniques, they still believed that Dagon would have a hard time fending off the blow. At first glance, it seemed like Manho had the upper hand, but in reality, he was struggling against Dagon's combination of offensive moves and clever distractions. Unable to maintain his balance for long, Manho was caught off guard with a sweep to his leg, losing his footing and falling instantly. Seizing the moment, Dagon swiftly grabbed the collar of Manho's shirt and hurled him into the corner of the wall as if he were tossing a toy. Despite the clear advantage Dagon had in the fight, the cunning and underhanded tactics of Manho still made him cautious, especially with the confident look in his opponent's eyes as he observed from the sidelines.